Hello and welcome to the Airline Weekly Lounge. My name is Jay Shavit. I'm joined today by my colleague Meghna Maharishi. Today we're going to review some more from Q1 earnings season, and Meghna is going to talk about a new feature that she's done on Silicon Valley's new arms race. Meghna, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
And why are you here and not Gordon?
There's a power outage in Portugal and Spain, and the power is still out. It's been quite a bit of time, so.
Yeah, it's and thanks for doing this on such short notice here, Meghna. Meghna's filling in for, as she mentioned, it's Monday, and by now, by the time you're listening to this late in the week, you probably have heard that the entire Iberian Peninsula apparently is out of power. So poor Gordon in Portugal is stuck without the necessities of life, and but we have you covered here. So we've got Meghna back up, and she was covering earnings just like Gordon and I as well. So we have more than enough expertise to share with you, and then Meghna will share a feature story that she was working on, published last week. Is that right?
Yeah, this past Sunday, like just yesterday.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that would be looks like the 27th is the publishing date on that. So, all right, shall we begin? Let's start with a little bit more about earnings. I was joking in this week's issue that I felt like a little bit like I was watching that show House Hunters, where you know how the real estate agents, they always show you the nice parts of the house first, and only later do they take you into the basement that's got rats running around. And I felt a little bit like that because earlier this month, earnings season started with Delta and United, and both of those carriers actually had pretty positive things to say. Both importantly delivered solid profitability, both on a net basis and an operating basis. But now last week we kind of got shown the basement. American, Alaska, and Southwest, all three of those reported last week, and all of them reported losses. So both at the net and operating levels. I don't want to overemphasize the how dirty the basement is here, because the losses weren't severe. And in the case of Southwest and Alaska, the loss margins actually improved quite significantly. And some of that was surely because of lower fuel prices, no doubt there. American, however, we'll talk a little bit more about them now. American actually earned an operating profit last year, small, but last year's first quarter, they actually made money. And this year they didn't. So there's a regression there. And so the big question is why, especially considering that fuel prices have descended so much. And I'll start with one reason, and Meghna, if you have anything to add to this, there are a few things going on at American, but one reason they did mention is they estimated that the crash of their flight out of DCA, Washington, DCA, if you'll recall, in the first quarter, they estimate that cost them about $200 million in revenue. And as it turns out, American's operating result was negative $200 million. Now, we can't be too precise in saying that American would have exactly broken even if it wasn't for the crash. But roughly speaking, that is the case. They also mentioned some other disruptions like the wildfires in Los Angeles. That is a market they're exposed to. They mentioned some rough winter weather in their Sunbelt hubs. Think of Dallas and Charlotte. So that's a little bit of a, just an introduction of why American is losing money when their rivals Delta and United made money. Anything to add to that, Meghna?
Yeah, I mean, I guess also with American, partially attributed their sort of disappointing quarter to just the general economic environment, which is a thread we've been seeing with all the airlines. I guess the thing is also Delta and United still reported a profit in the first quarter, and they both did pretty well despite being very cautious. And I wonder if to a certain extent, Americans' lack of a very like robust international network and maybe not as compelling premium product is maybe becoming a bit of a problem for the airline.
Right. That's a great point. And I have here, just to give you some numbers about, let's see, looks like American last quarter, about 71% of their passenger revenue came from the domestic market. For United, it was only 61%. So you're right to point that out, Meghna, that American was more domestically exposed. Now Delta was 71% also, so that may go up a little bit. I think it does go up a little bit, it goes down a little bit. The domestic exposure goes down a little bit for Delta in the summer, maybe more so than American. I don't have those numbers on hand, but certainly relative to United, American is more domestically exposed, and domestic is kind of where some of these economic concerns are playing out in real time in hard data. American, all the airlines basically said that they're seeing softness in some of their leisure, price-sensitive, domestic travel. At the same time, though, most airlines say that premium is just fine. They say the intercontinental stuff is just fine. They say even corporate, some little bit of mixed sentiment across the airlines that have reported so far. There have been, I think Southwest, for example, mentioned that manufacturing sector, they're seeing less travel from there. I think they may have mentioned healthcare as well. Southwest, even though I think they said that the tech sector was okay, maybe Alaska flagged that as being one of the weaker areas. All of these airlines said that the professional sector, and by that I think they're really talking about finance, banking, consulting, lawyers, things like that. That seems to be still going strong as well. So I think the overall feeling coming out of these calls so far, the five U.S. airlines that have reported so far, the feeling is generally that the demand situation is still okay, but obviously with the tariff situation being as it is, there and consumer sentiment clearly through surveys and whatnot, and even corporate sentiment through surveys, clearly there's deep concerns about the economy. So I don't think anyone is sitting comfortably right now, but it's a little bit more like okay, so far we haven't really seen too much distress, but we're bracing for it. We're ready for it. We see those dark clouds on the horizon.
Yeah, and I think like another thing that I thought was interesting is like with every single airline that's reported so far, premium has become even more important for all of them. Like it was already important before because it was like the moneymaker and that's where the demand was. But now it seems as if a lot of airlines have placed even more importance on that because premium, for the most part, seems to be holding up so well, which is interesting just to see like this like wealthier segment of travelers are still willing to spend on like nicer seats and stuff. They're not trading down cabins yet, but I guess only time will tell if they do start doing that, if we do start feeling like those worse effects of the economy.
Good point. Yeah, there's so many questions swirling around this earnings season in particular because of what's going on in the economy. And one big one, as you point out, is will sort of upper income Americans still spend on travel? And one interesting theory that I've heard, and this didn't really come up in the earnings calls, but I've heard it in some other earnings calls outside of the industry, is that it is possible that as people as Americans sort of rush to buy, let's say, new cars or remodel their homes before prices start to rise because of these tariffs, it's possible that right now they are shifting some of their spending away from travel and more towards those kind of tangible goods like autos and like whatever it is, things you buy in Walmart. Hard to say if that's if airlines are really seeing that. They haven't actually explicitly said that, but that could be something because, over the past couple of years, really since coming out of the pandemic, it's been sort of the opposite trend, where consumers not buying as many durable goods and switching over to experiences and travel. So will that hold? Hard to say. The one sort of saving grace, or a couple saving graces for the American consumer, particularly at the upper end, and airlines will tell you that a lot of their customers tend to be sort of from that wealthier slice of the income spectrum. A couple of saving graces here. One is that yes, the stock market has gone down, so a lot of wealth erased from equities, but that has recovered somewhat, and sort of just as importantly, or at least as importantly, the housing market has held up pretty well. So if you do own a home, we're not seeing like we did, let's say, 2008, 2009 economic crisis where housing prices crashed. That source of wealth is still held up very strong. So it may be that, that the wealthier consumer, the households most likely to travel in first class over to Europe, maybe they just sail through this whole tariff episode without incident. I will just warn people, though, that I think we haven't seen even close to the worst of it yet. We don't know. These policies on tariffs seem to be changing by the minute. But if things still hold as they are now, and again, we're talking on Monday, it may be completely different by the time you're listening to this. But if the tariffs remain 175% or whatever on China as they do now on goods, we could be, the U.S. economy could be in for some very serious shortages and bankruptcies and layoffs, and it could get pretty ugly starting this summer, maybe into the fall. And I think that's what airlines are bracing for, and it really is only, it's really a wait and see at this point.
I mean, I'm curious to see what Frontier and JetBlue say as well. I mean, you were kind of mentioning how we kind of already saw the basement. I'm not sure if there's like a level below the basement.
Right.
But that might be
there might
bad.
be a lot more rats coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, the rodent infestation may be still hidden. So they may start coming out this week. That's a good point. Yeah, JetBlue, their stock, by the way, I haven't checked in the last couple of days, but it was really hovering at pretty low levels. So you wonder if anytime you see a really low stock price, you wonder if anyone's angling to perhaps take it over. Just mere speculation there. But you're right, those earnings calls will be very interesting this week.
Yeah, definitely interested just to see how all this uncertainty is affecting those like low cost and ultra low cost carriers, which everyone is pretty much forecasting are not going to fare as well this time around compared to the legacies, just because the legacies I think have really strengthened their products over the years. Like they've really diversified them. So yeah, I'm very curious to see what comes out this week.
Yeah, and a lot of just last thought on this, a lot of Delta. A lot of the strength that we saw from Delta and United, you kind of sense that a lot of that was, well, we know that a lot of that was intercontinental premium. Seemed like Asia was in particular very, very strong. And incidentally, American has the least exposure to Asia. They're very lightly exposed there. They have, decent presence in Tokyo, but not a whole ton otherwise. Some Australia stuff, which has been subject to a lot of competition. But the Asia seems to be very, very strong. And then, as you mentioned, like loyalty, very strong also. So there's, certain areas of the business that these carriers benefited from that, certainly JetBlue and Frontier and some of the smaller domestic oriented carriers are enjoying right now. So we'll get a sense of that in a couple of days. Maybe by the time you're listening to this, you'll have seen some of that or seen some of those rats. Hopefully the infestation isn't too bad. But now that we've talked about, now that we've visited both the basement and the sub-basement, we're going to take a pause, and then we're going to come back and talk about Meghna's article about Silicon Valley. Okay, Meghna, we're back. So tell us, you wrote about flying cars and supersonic jets. What's going on?
Yeah, so I guess for a lot of us in the media, we don't typically give these startups in those two areas a ton of attention. I think there's just generally a lot of skepticism over if flying taxis are actually going to happen in the next 2 years, and or if supersonic flight can even make a comeback. So I was really interested in exploring that skepticism because both of these industries have generated hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, the eVTOL industry is basically a multi-billion dollar industry, and they haven't even operated their first passenger flights yet. But they've gotten just like a flood of funding from so many different investors, ranging from like airlines to just venture capital firms. So I spoke to a few CEOs and executives at these startups just to learn more about their companies and their product. And I also got to speak with some trade group officials who work closely with a lot of these like regulatory agencies too that oversee these processes. And I don't know, it kind of changed my perspective a little bit. I'm still pretty skeptical, but maybe I'm a little bit less skeptical. I don't know.
Yeah, it was super interesting. I know, it is somewhat dispiriting as an American. I know there was a time decades ago when aviation was really at the cutting edge of innovation, and it does kind of seem, and some of the quotes in your article kind of speak to this, but it does kind of seem that there really hasn't been too much revolutionary. I mean, all the innovation that we come in contact with when we're flying tends to be more evolutionary. I mean, there's no doubt that the 787 is much more technologically advanced than, let's say an old 707 or whatever. But at the same time, it's basically looks the same. I mean, it's an airplane with two wings, and it's so it's yeah. We'll just have to I think we'll see what the future holds as far as radical innovations. Air taxis is definitely something that's poised to perhaps shake things up. You mentioned in your article autonomous flying as well, and then supersonic flying. So I guess it's just see. Are you feeling confident that when our grandchildren are flying, that many decades now, it's going to be a completely different experience?
Maybe air taxis. Like, I think that, at least just based off of my reporting, seems like the most realistic thing to happen. Like, it is going through all these regulatory processes right now with the FAA. They're doing test flights. Airlines are already like announcing partnerships with them. And, I don't necessarily believe that airlines would be so quick to jump in on something like this if they didn't think it had a chance of being completely impossible, because I do think the response to something like a boom supersonic is a little bit more tepid from the industry. So I don't know, who knows? I think air taxis might actually be a thing, and maybe we'll all be flying to the airport instead of sitting in an hour long traffic. Supersonic flight, though, I'm still not too sure. It seems like there's just a lot of concerns out there still about it.
Right. It just seems like the regulatory and legal hurdles are just so much larger than they were decades past. It's I think it's just a lot harder to get approval for some of this stuff, and even simple things like communities don't want plane eVTOLs landing anywhere near them, that kind of thing, and so they'll fight it. So that's a lot of hurdles for sure. At the same time, there is sort of a sense that maybe we've gone too far in terms of resisting technology, and maybe there'll be some more openings and some relaxation. Some of these these hurdles I mentioned, it's a lot of that will play out in the political process and whatnot. But it's I wouldn't count some of that stuff out. But the hurdles are definitely large.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny because in my story, I quote this sort of famous Peter Thiel quote where he says, "We wanted flying cars, instead we got 140 characters." And it's just interesting to think that with Silicon Valley and all the things that they've invented and innovated, the one thing they haven't really been able to touch too much has been aviation. I mean, to be quite honest. And it's funny when you hear a lot of like founders and like people in the tech space talk, they're always like trashing regulators and like blaming them for everything. But also at the end of the day, like, yeah, it's been like slow to change, but also flying has just become so much safer at the same time. So
Great point. Yeah, it's an important point to make.
So there's that balance there too.
Yeah. No, definitely. You'll hear people sometimes say, you know, America doesn't build anything anymore, and I think you know, they're referring to, perhaps nostalgically referring to the age of, you know, supersonic jets, and, you know, we built the Hoover Dam and the Empire State Building, and I think a lot of the innovation in the American economy has come in the digital space, you know, in places that people can't see, that people that are like physically tangible, that are harder to, you know, maybe regulate, and where homeowners are not going to scream foul. So you'll have some incredible innovation and, you know, some Google algorithm, but you'll have basically the same aircraft as you had 40 years ago. So I don't know if that changes anytime soon, but something to watch for sure. And I encourage everyone to check out Meghna's article. It's on the Skift website. And I also encourage you to check out Airline Weekly and subscribe if you don't already. And with that, we'll call it a podcast, and see you all next week.
Whether you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, please make sure to subscribe, rate us 5 stars, or leave us a positive review. This really helps us get the word out about the Airline Weekly Lounge, so we can continue to bring you this podcast every week, absolutely free of charge. And if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Skift channel and hit the notification bell to find out whenever a new video drops.